Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Friday Harbor Film Festival of 2021. We are now going to have a Q&A with the creators of Earth Emergency, Interconnections, and Plants Have Wings. The director's statement for Earth Emergency is, "This film is a frank presentation of what scientists know about how the Earth is warming." I think I did a typo there. How the Earth is warming the Earth. Did I do a typo? How about one of you give the director's statement? I think you could do it better than me.
Bonnie, go ahead.
Well, I don't have it in front of me, but I'll tell you that you are correct in saying it's about the Earth is warming the Earth, because the film is about Earth's own natural warming feedback loops that have been kicked into high gear by human-caused emissions. And so the Earth is, in fact, warming itself now, thanks to these feedback loops.
Got it. It wasn't a typo after all.
No.
All right. Well, we've driven that point home now, right in the first minute of this Q&A. So the second portion of the statement is, after watching it, viewers can decide from a place of understanding what they want to do about a reality that is becoming harder and harder to ignore. Why don't both of you just give a quick bio of yourselves, and then I'll move on to Rose.
Sure. So I'm Bonnie Waltch, and I'm the senior producer and writer of Earth Emergency. I'm an independent producer, director, and writer in the Boston area. And I worked on this 1-hour film, which actually began as 5 short films for the web. And I also do a lot of work for museum exhibit media, and I've done documentaries for PBS and cable and various other clients over the years. And I'll pass it on to Melanie.
Okay, thank you, Bonnie. So I'm Melanie Wallace. I am currently working as an impact producer with the Earth Emergency team. And I've spent my career at PBS and at the Nova series as a science journalist and a filmmaker and a writer and a director, and, creating science programs for the general public. And when I had an opportunity to work on a climate change project, I jumped at it because this is the story of our time. And I'm delighted to be working with Bonnie and Susan and Barry, the team that made Earth Emergency.
Thank you so much. All right, on to Rose. Rose Madrone produced and directed Interconnections and Plants Have Wings. She's a documentary filmmaker examining the ripple effects of our actions in an interconnected world. She has a background as a teacher of botany and herbal medicine. How did I capture that, Rose?
That's pretty good. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, welcome to all of you. I feel extremely honored to be in the presence of you great women, truly. Thank you for joining us. So I will start off posing the question of, how did making these films impact you and your lives? Maybe a snapshot of the challenges, and also, what did the experience give to you? So was this at all a departure from the usual stuff that you do, or, what did it take to get this done, and where was the compulsion from? So how about, I'll start with you, Rose.
Well, first off, I'm really glad to be here. So thanks for hosting our films and such. I have a background in botany, and so I know a lot about the plant world. I've worked with sustainability a lot. And I had this, I was asked a question at one point, if I could do something to help cultivate a conversation that I wanted to be more a part of in the world that had some healing qualities and some sustainable measures to it, what would that be? And not something like ending world hunger, but something that I could personally do. I realized that film is a way that we actually learn so much these days. We learn on the screen. We've actually created curriculum to go with our films. There's another film that goes with this connectivity project trio. And just really wanted to empower people to realize that what they do actually makes a difference, which I saw is a similar thing to what the climate emergency film really is trying to cultivate. And I think that that's some of the most important stuff that we can do, is to empower people to realize, in this overwhelming time of, knowing the issues that we don't feel good about that are happening in the world, we actually know what has created a lot of the problems, as the Earth emergency, or the climate emergency, also shows in our film show. And we also know a lot of the solutions. And I felt that some of the issues that we could help to stimulate was that, when we see how interconnected everything is, we would then empower people that their actions matter, and hopefully it will cultivate change in people. And I was not a filmmaker initially, just felt like this was a really important medium to work with. And through the whole experience, I have learned so much more about the interconnected way that the world functions, and how every culture and spiritual tradition and such has a relationship with this. So it was a real honor to work on this work.
Thank you so much, Rose. Yeah, so it was a departure from your typical life, and I think that's what's interesting in this whole conversation, is that everyone really needs to start picking up whatever tools are beside them and use them. And Melanie and Bonnie, obviously, this is filmmaking, and this work is in keeping with the careers that you've already been engaged with. But was it an about face at all? Was this particular project an about face, or where did the compulsion come from for you to engage in this project? And I'll just let you decide who wants to go first.
Well, Bonnie has to go first.
I'll start, and then Melanie will jump in. So for me, I actually began my career as a science filmmaker, and Melanie and I actually worked together way back when in the 80s. So I really loved making science films, and when this project came along, I actually was working more on history programs for museums through a production company in Boston. And when Barry, who was part of our team, came to us to work on this project, he came to Susan Gray, who's the director, who unfortunately couldn't be here tonight because she's traveling in Europe. He came to us and said, I want to make a film about feedback loops. I keep hearing about feedback loops. And I really jumped at the chance to get back into science filmmaking, because that was always my passion. So I really loved getting involved in this project. As I started learning about feedback loops, though, I got extremely depressed, because I learned way more than I ever knew or really wanted to know at the time about what was happening to the planet. And it really kind of threw me into a tailspin, and I felt really overwhelmed by what I was learning. And I was, I immediately rushed to put solar panels on my roof and try to see whatever I could do to make a difference. But once I kind of, realized that, this was important work to do and it just had to get done, I was really, I felt like it's a very important message to get out into the world. And what I really appreciated about Barry's approach is he really wanted to just focus on the science. And it's what Greta Thunberg always says, which is listen to the scientists, just listen to the scientists. And I realized that that's what we have to do. We have to tell people the science so they really get it and understand what's going on. And so I felt like we were kind of doing, a really important job here by telling people the science in a very sort of neutral way. Like it's not supposed to be political. It's just, here's what's really going on the planet. And so it just felt like such an important message to get across. And I do think it's being well received, because people are really getting it in a way. It's explained, I think, very well by the scientists about what's going on. So I feel like, I'm so happy to be involved in this kind of project, spreading the word in an important way.
Great. All right.
Melanie?
Yes. Well, having known Bonnie and Susan, the filmmakers, for a while, I knew they were making this film, and I was kind of giving them some advice from my connections at being at PBS and working on science programs for quite a long time. And at some point, it just occurred to me that I could actually help them and make a bigger difference if I kind of committed to working together with them to use my connections and my networks that I've developed over, 25 years out in the world to bring this film. It's a well done, beautifully made, and very important story out. And one of the things we did this summer is we connected with the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History and created a series of webinars, one a month. Each month was on a different feedback loop. And that had great response. And then we were talking and said, wouldn't it be great if we could get this film to COP26? And I had a friend in London and I made a call and we started talking, and, it was a bunch of connections, but it will be seen at COP26. That's going to happen, which is so exciting, right? And through the connections that I had made through my career, I was able to bring that attention to this film right now. And it's been so gratifying. And we're actively working at getting in the schools. As Rose said, we have a curriculum that goes with this film, and it will be on PBS December 29th at 8 p.m. And it will be part of the PBS Learning Media website. And so we have ways to get it into schools and teachers and globally. So it's been very gratifying.
So there's quite a bit of entrepreneurship that's gone into this film then.
Absolutely. I mean, from our colleague Barry Hershey, who supported us. He's a little bit of an entrepreneur. He just had this idea, as Bonnie said, feedback loops. Scientists know about feedback loops, but real people don't necessarily know about them. And so let's just make a science film that will explain it. And the feedback we've been getting from people who have been viewing it has been very, very positive. And one person said, I just understand the urgency now, having seen how these feedback loops are working.
Right. So perhaps both of you can just give us a little synopsis again of the feedback loop. And I'm interested in this group conversation. In Rose's Plants Have Wings, there's a lot of talk, well, how do we mitigate? And mitigate is one thing, restore is another. What do we do in response to this anthropogenic climate disruption? And, Plants Have Wings is about resilience. It's about giving the bees a chance, giving the monarchs a chance. So on one hand, you've got feedback loops, which is like a death spiral. And on the other hand, how do we respond to that? And so if you could, give us another overview of the feedback loop, and perhaps Rose, you can respond with how you think your material maybe in its own way responds to the feedback loop, if that makes sense to you.
Well, the feedback loops were, we covered 4 of the major ones in the film, Earth Emergency. And so people who've seen the film know that it means warming that takes place that causes further warming. So for example, the permafrost is thawing because the Arctic is 2.5 times warmer than the rest of the globe. And so the permafrost is thawing, and that thaw releases greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, like methane and carbon dioxide, which then warms the atmosphere further, which then creates more warming. So it's basically a vicious cycle that goes around. So that's an example of feedback loops. And I'm forgetting the second part of your question now.
Oh, no, you're doing just fine. It's the idea of the occurrence of these feedback loops. And it's, I guess, on the other side of that spectrum, what's the counterforce to that?
Yeah, that's the big question. Obviously we have to stop the warming. And the way you stop the warming is stop putting CO2 into the atmosphere, which is, of course, easier said than done. And, this is something scientists are grappling with, and there's no easy solution. So I think what the scientists tell us is the best thing you can do is talk about it. And that's one of the reasons we made this film, is so we can talk about it and we can educate people. Because as Melanie said, when people finally understand what's going on and they say, oh, now I get it. I keep hearing about global warming, but now I really get what's happening. Then they'll have the information they need to try to take action, which means, voting for the right legislators or trying to push certain policies. And I think as a community, we really have to come together the way Greta and all the youth activists are to say, like, this has to stop. We can't do this anymore. So I wish there were an elegant solution. I don't know what it is. I think we have to just keep talking about it and pushing for policies. And unfortunately, it's not going to take me putting solar panels on my house to solve the problem. It's going to take, corporations and governments and politicians to make these changes. And it's a long fight that we have to keep engaging in over and over again every day.
So one of the things that comes out in the film where we look at forests and the feedback loops that are taking place in the forest, and the message there is leave the old growth forest growing. They are taking CO2 out of the atmosphere. I mean, it's great to plant new trees, but new trees don't do the same work as the old trees. But there's a whole industry that exists to remove the old trees and create an economic engine, right? So it's how do you get that message out that there's other things you need to do? Grow bamboo. It's not the same as taking down an old growth tree. Right. And the Amazon has long been taking CO2 out, and it's now at the tipping point of not necessarily taking this CO2 out the way it has, but perhaps putting CO2 in when they burn the old growth forests down. So saving the old growth trees is really a thing people can advocate for right now.
And it's not just forests, it's wetlands, it's grasslands, right. It's using certain kind of agricultural practices that store carbon instead of release it. It's on so many levels. There are things that can be done. It's just people have to push for those things to happen. And the wood pellet industry is another thing that is considered carbon neutral, but it really isn't. It's only because the calculations don't take into account various parts of the process that release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So things like the wood pellet industry, it's a complete fallacy that that's carbon neutral. So it's all kinds of areas where people really have to educate themselves and fight for change.
Just quickly, when you say the wood pellet industry, now you're talking about home heating stoves, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
It's big in the UK. And what they do is they come here and cut down forests in the southeastern United States, for example, and they ship they're supposed to just take, branches and brambles that have fallen off, and they're clearing things up and neatening them up, but really they're cutting trees down, and they're shipping the products back to Europe and the UK and burning them. And it turns out it's actually worse than burning coal.
Funny what happens when you run the numbers on some stuff, huh?
Yep.
Well, and I think that one of the really important things, like you guys with your film did a really great job in delineating a lot of what the impacts are and the issues are. I think that's a really great film to use for educating. I totally agree that education is a vital part. Mm-hmm. And there are so many issues. Certainly climate is like the huge issue that impacts all of us. And we know about all the other issues that, have feedback loops. And feedback loops are not a bad thing. They just are. And then when we do things that are destructive, the feedback loop that gets created from that and ends up, escalating into something. We could create feedback loops that were positive things too.
Absolutely.
So just to reiterate that to the audience, that
right.
And that's the beauty of things, is that our actions, like what you have shown with the different scientists and the way that they've been talking about things, what we're trying to do with our film is that if people can understand that their actions, whether it's how you communicate with people or what you buy or how you vote or, the things that you get educated about ancient forests or, so many issues, they are all interwoven in the greater system. So I know that it can be super overwhelming to think about the climate issues, to think about other things like that. And really what we're trying to do, and I think that you're trying to do as well, is it's like if we can educate people that their actions matter, and that there's many different ways that we could go about, like, you should just choose, like, what is your issue? and move in that direction and support people who are working for that. Greta Thunberg and you know, a lot of the other youth that fortunately are showing up, because for some reason we're listening to them and not older people. You know, I love that they have shown up in that regard. And that really it's about getting educated and realizing that there is this beautiful way that the world functions. And we, you know, it's no longer a time to think that that we have incredible abundance and we can do what we want. We really are, with each choice that we're making, we're voting for, we're creating, we're paid money towards an outcome of a certain way. And if we take the time to really realize that it's kind of beautiful to know that you're that important and that instrumental in cultivating the future that you want. So I think that, you know, by showing films in this way, it's, you know, one help in the conversation, because I agree that the more we talk about it and the more we educate ourselves on all the issues, climate certainly is a giant important one, that we will be better off if we just pay more attention.
I love that your film gives people, you know, shows examples of what you can do. I think that's so great, because our film really just focuses on the science, and we get a lot of questions like, well, now I understand it, but what can I do? And that's not really where, like, our film ends before we answer that question. It's really presenting the issue. So I'm so glad that your film offers that to people, gives them some concrete actions.
Thank you. And that's something that I was really clear about, that I really wanted to be able to inspire people, but then give them someplace to go. And so on our website, and this is something I would imagine you might do on yours too, and that is an opportunity we can each do. We keep referring people back to our website, because from there you can actually see great work that's happening, different organizations that, if you're so compelled and don't want to be the front runner in a movement, there's people who are doing great work. Being able to show the, you know, that so many examples of people who are creating, being, you know, that we can emulate and do actions that are some, you know, helping create steps to remedy some of the issues. And we all know that some of those isms, like Margaret Mead talked about, never doubt that a small group of concerted, dedicated people can make a difference in the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. That really our being able to move in the direction of making change, like as we wonder if it matters, that's really, I think, what our films are both trying to show. And then, oh, I see that in the chat, we've given information about how to reach Connectivity Project, and please come visit us there. There's a resource page that has lots of work that's happening that can be very inspiring. You can find out how to access our films, and we're really trying to get into schools. We're carried by Bullfrog Films, and so they're our distributor, and we're trying to get it into the most hands possible. And the feedback that we're getting from teachers, that it's really a wonderful tool that they can use to instigate a lot of the conversations they want to with their kids from 5th grade through college and into the community and at festivals like this.
That's wonderful, Rose. You know, I'm certainly seeing just an abundance of individuals and groups doing a heck of a lot of work, whether it's film or research or advocacy, outreach, all kinds of things. And I do keep a close eye on, you know, the activities of our political leaders and decision makers. And there's a real dynamic there that's been rooted in very familiar patterns. Got to get reelected. There's a whole status quo and a set of interests. And I sure don't know what it's like to have to wade through that, but I do know that it's not quite working as well as it should. But given, you know, this great volume of work that's being done by the citizenry, at what point does it breach into our political realm? I'm certain that it's trickling in, and we're seeing movement in the political world embracing it little by little, but it's just not enough, and it's not fast enough. on all fronts, biodiversity, climate change, all of it. So how do we, well, and there's also the sector of academia, which some of you might be more familiar with, and which is also connected, in many ways to our political body. But what are your thoughts on what our decision makers, want to do versus what they are able to do? And given that spectrum, what can people do to support them? There's a biggie for you. I'll bat it back to Bonnie or Melanie there, if you have something.
Melanie, I'll let you take this one.
I think it goes back to this idea of giving people the information that they need so that they understand. I mean, part of what we learned in the making of the Feedback Loop film is that the scientists understood how that worked, but they weren't, for whatever reason, and Bonnie can correct me, that the impact of the feedback loop accelerating the change was not able to be incorporated very well into the models. And so there was this disjuncture between what they knew about how things were working and what they were trying to understand deeply with, let's get to 1 point, let's not go over 1.5 C, in terms of the temperature, then we'll be okay. Mm-hmm. But that number wasn't actually connected to the basic science that had been worked on. I mean, when I was at NOVA, I did a climate change film in 1983. I interviewed Al Gore in his Senate office. This was in 1983. It was on NOVA. Climate Crisis is what it was called. Right? And now it's 2021 and we're still doing it. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the same people that showed up that show up in Earth Emergency were just in their offices talking about this in the 80s, right? We know that in the 70s. Even, Warren Washington, who's one of the great scientists in our film, in the 60s, he was working on this. So I think by understanding what's really happening, you can get a sense of the urgency and you can just keep talking like Rose was talking about. You have to put it out there.
Yeah.
And yeah, Bonnie.
Well, you're right. And Melanie's right that some of these feedback loops, like the permafrost one, have not been included in the modeling. And so that is a disconnect. And also the scientists will tell you now that they were, I don't know who this applies to exactly and what the time frame is, but there was a period where a lot of scientists didn't want to go out on a limb because all the science wasn't in yet, or they didn't know exactly when things were going to happen. And so there was this reticency by
level of uncertainty. They're concerned about the uncertainty.
There was a reticence by scientists to say, like, this is urgent, this is important. Like, they didn't want to be seen by their peers as being too alarmist or not scientific enough. And now that's really changed because now things are really urgent. And there's this feeling, at least I've gotten from the scientists we interviewed, that has totally shifted now. And they are going out on a limb. And even if all the science isn't in yet and they don't know exactly when, what's going to happen, they feel like they have to ring the alarm now. And that wasn't always happening before. So there's that shift.
I think that something that helps me also to keep in mind is check out the amount of electric cars that exist now. Mm-hmm. And alternative means of generating electricity. Like, that was not current up until recently. Change is happening. All the youth who are, speaking up, they're, as much as it's a despairing time and it's so overwhelming, and I'm not saying rest because things are happening. I just want to remember that things are happening. We are making progress. As such, it motivates me to be more inspired too, to be out there, to try to, my ripple right now in the world is to help educate people with the films and the things that I'm doing. That progress is being made in some ways, not fast enough for some of the issues, but I keep wanting to remember that for my sanity, to, we have come a distance.
Thank you for reminding us and painting that picture. It's an important fire to have under our butts moving forward. All right, well, here's a topic I will let you play with. There's concern about the planet and the health of the well-being of the planet for humans, and concern about the health and well-being of the planet for nature itself. I'd love to hear all of your thoughts about that. If you've ever had a moment of repose to consider, we're still very anthropocentric. This society is, and what kind of cracks are opening up and showing some light for you in terms of where do species fit into our concern. And I don't want to choose. Who's got a thought? Anybody feeling compelled to jump on that one?
Well, I totally will, in the sense that all species, as we learn, are essential. We eventually, evolution, the way the planet has evolved, we learn. We're learning as we go with what the interruption of missing some species can provide. But in reality, if we could hang on to every species, that would be really important. But we're not. There's a lot that are going extinct as we speak. That, and sort of back to the issue of what is your issue? Like, what gives you fire and makes you feel inspired? If that has to do with saving certain species, and which, like, who lives in the old growth forest? That's one way that old growth forests get more attention and more juice from other people who are trying to save things. That I think that that is like the saddest part of the whole thing, is that there are so many species that are, struggling at our expense of the changes that we've made. And they're each essential. And if you're compelled to work more towards a species because that's your issue versus talking about politics, pay attention to that and move in that direction. So that's one plug that I want to just offer.
Thank you, Rose. All right. Bonnie, Melanie, doing it for people, doing it for species. Where does it all fit in?
Well, it's all so interconnected, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
Everything, all the warming that's happening is decimating all kinds of species. I mean, look at what's happening in the oceans. The oceans are warming, coral reefs are dying. It's messing up everything. And we have one of my favorite lines in the film is this MIT scientist, Kerry Emanuel, who says, "I'm not worried about the planet, I'm worried about us." Because he's right, the planet will be just fine, but us and many, many other species will go extinct, So it's all interconnected. And yeah, as Rose says, whatever gets you fired up is great, because it all needs advocacy on some way or another.
I mean, we all need each other. I mean, and I think that's what, is kind of the bottom line. And David Attenborough now, after years of doing his programs about the natural world, is finally like bringing it all together and saying, we need, in order for us to stay healthy, the species have to stay healthy. We are interconnected. And, one person can't do everything, as Rose clearly said. So everybody has to pick what they care the most about. But, if we save ourselves, we're going to save more species too. Right. I mean, it works together. And we are all dependent on each other. We can't lose sight of that.
Yeah. And it's back to the interconnections, that we all think about. And, like what we're trying to do with our films is make it joyous. Like, there are so many hard issues out there. And what I'm trying to do is maybe catch people who are slipping through the cracks, who, it's hard for them to watch hard issues. And so it's like, wait, this is important. We're going to make it, as accessible as possible, because we have a wide range of audience that we're trying to reach, the more we can I'm just going to reiterate it. It's like, it's education. It's, if we talk about it more, if we feel empowered, and maybe we'll feel empowered because we see this beautiful way that the world's interconnected and the feedback loops that exist, then we will show up a little more strongly to fight for and protect what we care about. And kudos to you guys for this film festival. That I've looked at the roster of what you've created, and it's things like this that help people have access to really great information. So I'm really grateful of what you guys have compiled and such. So thank you for that.
I know this team is very grateful to hear that, and also just very grateful for the work you guys are bringing to this film and also participating in the dialogue. So it's there's an example of a positive feedback loop.
So one thing I just want to pick up on that Rose said, like, one person, every person can make a difference. Like, you can plant in your garden plants that the monarch butterflies need, the milkweed. You can do that, and that will help those butterflies. It's just your little garden, but you can make a difference. And everybody has to find what touches them, but it can be a small gesture that actually can have a big ramification.
Right. It's really good to drill that into our heads. We cannot lose sight of that. Otherwise, we feel powerless. All right, I have a fun exercise that you might embrace, hopefully. So if you just do a moment of suspension of disbelief, and abandoning what anyone else considers to be realistic or not. What is your best envisioning for life on this planet? Just in your wildest dreams, even if it's just a little snapshot, or if you've ever thought about it more in depth. Can be an end goal, or how you think we could get there, but just letting yourself drift a little. And what would this planet look like to you in health and abundance and equilibrium?
Well, I'll start that. It's pretty available in my mind to wish for people who maybe think differently than I do, have different ethics than I do as far as politics, or like, we all try to stand up for what we believe in, even if we don't think like each other all the time. And my wish is that people would take each other into consideration, realize what a community we are on this planet. Like, all of those amazing images that we see in people who are in outer space, and they look back and they see the reality of, we have this one planet. And just like what the climate issue is really showing us, is we're so impacted by so many things that everybody does. And so my wish is that that people would wake up to realize that whatever if finances is what drives you, or politics, or whatever, that we each get a chance to care the most about other species, about other people on the planet, whatever background they're from. That I know that we have issues that we have to struggle with to find that sense of compassion. And it's really not that big of a stretch. I know we get indoctrinated into different ways that we were raised, or what our political parties hold or something, but I think that caring for each other is a really available aspect. And if we care for each other, which might be the four of us on this panel, or everybody that's in the audience, or people in this country, or people around the world, and all the creatures and such, that if we took that into consideration, we have a pretty good thing going here. And we're messing it up, and we know how to not do that. So to me, just being able to support the real importance of what it takes to have a healthy planet and all of its creatures. So I know it's like the biggest wish ever, but I don't feel like it's a far-fetched thing. So that's one of my visions.
Great. Well,
I just want to pick up on what Rose said, because what I was just thinking about is that people need to lead with compassion for themselves and compassion for people that they don't know. And I think bringing that understanding into all aspects of our lives is what will bring us together to make the hard decisions. So,
oh, that's a really great observation. It's that will help to propel us.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that a lot of what harms the planet comes from greed, but not all of it. I mean, I think some comes from inequity. Like people in the rainforest in Brazil, some of them are cutting down trees because they need to make a livelihood. You know, some people don't have a choice in terms of what they need to survive. So for me, I guess my ideal vision of the world would be where there's more equity so that the planet can be protected and less greed. So more equity, less greed. That's my vision.
Excellent. I love it. Well, do you guys have any fun things to share about the making of your films? Any good stories along the way? Or hardships, challenges? You know, it's a big hurdle everybody goes over to make a film.
Yeah, well, we got all our filming done right before COVID hit. So our biggest challenge was having to edit and review and, make progress on our films all working remotely. We were really looking forward to having group screenings to review and get feedback, and we had to do it all, remotely, virtually, and that was a big challenge.
Yeah, COVID has certainly interrupted so much, and we actually missed our world release, big shebang. There were a lot of things that we had lined up in our release that wasn't able to happen, so we're kind of piecemealing it now. Although the beauty of what COVID, what we have to offer is that because our stuff is virtual and can be virtual, that it is very useful for teachers in this moment of not even knowing, like, are they supposed to be in the classroom or not? So we created things to be in that way. And I think one of the things that was really beautiful to me in the process of making our films was I really wanted to make it from a vantage point of weaving the interconnections of what it takes to create stories like this. And so being able to meet people from different cultures and spiritual traditions and science and such, everybody really was really interested in sharing their information about how to weave these ideas together. And it was very challenging in a lot of ways. And the times when I would start waning and feeling like it was pretty daunting, somebody would give us money or something, like the universe would provide something, and we would get a little bit of funding, or people would say, would you please hurry up and finish this because it's very important, we need this for our school. So I would get this this affirming, yes, please continue, even though maybe you're waning a little bit. And so we're kind of at another place with that, where we're hopefully we're trying to see where we can get more funding to do more episodes about, really the next one I want to do is about climate, and kind of have a different take on how to empower people with it, and a couple of other issues. So we're always looking to get it into the schools more. I would love if anybody knows teachers or wants to talk with us about how to access our stuff. That's kind of always the daunting part, I think, for any filmmaker. Is it's great being in film festivals and it sounds like you guys, you've done a really good job with the impact producing and such to get it into really good hands. And really, I think both of our work, the more people who see it, the more empowering it will be. So audience, that's a call out to you. If you want to do anything to help these films happen, please be in touch with, any of us, because it really, that makes a big difference.
Wonderful.
So one interesting thing that happened is, I'm not sure how the word got out, but some artists started looking at our films and then being inspired to create works of art about climate feedback loops. And we've been able to put those up on our website. And that's been a really interesting artistic feedback loop. And to have this synergy between scientists and artists and have the big ideas of climate inspire people to look at the world and create their own piece of art to spread the message. So all artists, I'm calling you out to take a look at these films and be inspired.
Yeah, and people can connect with us through our website. So if anyone wants to reach out to us, our website is feedbackloopsclimate.com.
Great. It's almost starting to feel as though this is a case of don't waste a good crisis. So Rose, I think I've got a sense of where you're headed. Bonnie and Melanie, where are you going to take? Well, we know the next COP meeting is where it's headed. Where else is Earth Emergency headed?
Well, I might just mention that we're extremely grateful to have the opportunity to show our film before the members of Parliament in London. They had an opportunity to see it and wanted the members to see it leading up to COP. So that event is going to be happening very soon as well. And we're thrilled to bits.
And we're also we're collaborating with Rotary International, which has 15 million members around the world. And they have a subgroup called SRAG that focuses on environmental issues, which is wonderful because, Rotary is business leaders. So it's a really great group to be affiliated with. And we're having a special screening with them also in early November, which will be virtual.
You guys are just getting started.
And I recently, Bonnie doesn't even know this, but I had a conversation with somebody who's big in the Boy Scouts, and they want to create a webinar for us to talk to the Boy Scouts.
Great.
Wow. And how about Greta Thunberg? Where does she sit with your film?
Well, she's in it.
Right?
She and the Dalai Lama were in our launch event in January of 2021. We introduced them virtually and had a panel with them and a couple of scientists and showed clips from the film. So she's been a big, proponent of ours in a great way. And we're hoping that we can connect with her at COP somehow with the films.
Right. And then just out of curiosity, where are the naysayers? Is there a critique? The sort of anti-anthropogenic climate change crowd, have they seen it and given a little feedback yet?
It's interesting. We really haven't heard from those people.
Not yet. I mean, once it's on PBS or, once it has a higher profile, I'm sure, there will be some negative reaction. But as Bonnie said, we really just tried to stay grounded in what the scientists know and what they've been saying and where the evidence is. So that's what this film is about. What is a feedback loop? How does it work? And why should we care?
And it's a discussion.
Right.
So everyone's welcome to the discussion.
Right. It's not meant to be political per se. It's just explaining the science.
Perfect. Yeah, we need more of that. Well, let's see. I guess we've got a few more minutes. We can transition to our close now. So what's one last message from each of you? You've really done a great job presenting your story, and this is not trite. I mean, this is an existential moment in the evolution of mankind. And each step that we take, every moment and every day, has far-reaching implications. Even if it's not a step, a lack of a step will have far-reaching implications. So that's a little bit of weight to have on our backs, but we also have each other, and we have a vision. So just in a closing statement, maybe your parting words to anyone joining us watching this discussion today.
Well, I've found that that when I'm talking to people who I don't even know, and I'm talking, in the grocery store or whatever, I just find a way to bring into the conversation, have you given any thought to climate feedback loops? And that's what happened today. I was going into a shop, and the Boy Scouts had their table and they were selling popcorn. So I bought them some popcorn, and then I said, have you guys given any thought to climate feedback loops? I'm working on a film. And I started telling them, and the older guy who was there, the main guy who's on the board of the National Boy Scouts, overheard me and said, I think, would you be interested to talk to our National Boy Scout group? And, have you done webinars? I said, well, actually we have. And yes, we would be interested. I mean, it's just like,
I think you've got a good impact producer right there.
Bonnie. Know, right?
Yes. He's always working.
Never stop. I love it.
I just kind of had a little bit of a chuckle. It's like anybody could be the next person who wants to know more. So
right, and that's the whole point, right? To talk about it, to bring it up at dinner parties and cocktail parties, and spread the word. Right. And that's I think that's what we all have to do, is keep talking about it, keep getting people fired up, keep working.
Right.
Don't lose sight of it. Yep. And I do think there's a greater urgency now. I mean, people talk about cutting down emissions by, 2050, well, that's too late. We can't wait. We can't drag our feet. Things have to happen sooner, which is why people have to get educated sooner so they can understand the urgency. So I guess that's my parting statement, is just educate, talk.
Right.
Thank you. Rose?
I want to thank you guys for making the film that you did. I think that it is cutting edge and really, really important. And I love that you didn't bring emotions into it. You didn't bring politics into it, it's so educational. It's pretty dark and dire, and it's really important. And so I'm really glad that you did that. And I agree with what you're both saying, that we lead by example, and anybody in the audience knows this too, that when we work on things and talk about the things that are important to us, that's how we influence the people the most. And when I talk to people and they send things to me and it's about interconnections, it's kind of a beautiful thing, but what is amazing about it is it makes them think more about interconnections. And because your guys' topic is about feedback loops, which is interconnections, and climate, it's like we are giving that opportunity for that to be more part of the conversation. And so I think that that's what I encourage audience members to do, is like the things that are important to you, know that you help influence people by sharing your information and and sticking up for what you believe in. And so pass the word about these films, about this great film festival, and just know that what we do has such a resonating effect. So I'm really grateful for the work that everybody here is doing.
Well, I just want to thank you all for the work you're doing, and I'm inspired, and I'm just so glad you're out there in the world being yourselves, and I want you to keep on doing it and keep us posted about what you're doing. Always feel free to drop us a line and give us updates. We'll certainly be watching you and looking for updates, but the continuity is important. You have supporters here in San Juan Islands. We're here for that, and I really hope to meet all of you someday. I hope that you'll continue bringing your films here and show them to our audiences, and that we'll be able to, through our own outreach, help this community become more resilient to climate change, more proactive and educated about it, and actually become a model for other places in the country and in the world on how to respond to climate change. And we really need educators like you in order to do that for our community. So I'm just very thankful to be connected to your work, and hope to meet you in the near future.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's been
I love that.
delightful.
And that commitment for your community is a really beautiful thing. And I live in Portland, Oregon, but I'm actually looking up in your area in Port Townsend and Bellingham and maybe someplace around there to see if it's a new home for me. So reach out, anybody, if you have good ideas of great communities to be a part of, because I know that it's a really great place to live. So maybe I'll meet you soon.
Great. Thank you so much. I know you guys, Bonnie and Melanie, are on the East Coast, so you can wind down now. And thanks for visiting us on Pacific Coast time.
It's a pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you.
It was great.
Thanks very much.
A great pleasure, and my deepest gratitude for all of you. Thank you. And
Film.
take care, everyone.